watching his favorite Sunday morning cartoon. So how did he end up here? A voice calls out to Sotha, and an angel welcomes him to heaven. Sotha looks at the woman in front of him, fine golden hair, clothes struggling to contain her large bust, an aura that screams divinity. Why is a cosplayer with him? Sotha thinks to himself. Sotha asks her who she is and where they are, and she reiterates again that he is now in heaven. Thanks to a certain test result, it has been decided that Sotha will be reincarnated into another world. She introduces herself as the goddess of beauty, Aphrodite, and she explains that she will serve as his guide into the world he will settle into. Sotha doesn't really get what's going on, and his reaction comes as no surprise to Aphrodite. Her job is basically to guide trash like him so that he doesn't instantly die the moment he materializes into another world. Sotha can't help but notice that he was just called trash. She tells him to think open status, and he does as he is told. A window opens up in front of Sotha, which displays his currently middling stats. He receives the job Monster Tamer, which Aphrodite thinks is a little lame. She explains that in the world that she is sending him to, Atelhide, every person has a sacred task that they must carry out. These tasks vary from person to person and are dependent on what their job is. She says that, in other words, his job as Monster Tamer is a completely useless job, perfect for a NEET like him. That's how you know that his job will actually be very powerful later on. Sotha can't believe how unbelievably rude this woman is. Her appearance might be prim and proper on the outside, but she's a completely rotten goddess on the inside. Also, he's not a NEET. He's still in high school Danit. However, he can't deny that he is definitely in heaven, and he will most definitely be sent into some other world. Sotha inspects the rest of his status window, and he discovers a very helpful and detailed item description of something called a capsule ball. Sotha summons the item from his inventory, which appears to be a very cool-looking Pokeball. Aphrodite sees him fiddling with the capsule ball, and she explains that when he gets a monster with it, there is a set chance that it will tame them. Aphrodite prepares to send him into Atelhide, but before she can, Sotha says he'd like to test something. Aphrodite allows it. Maybe she shouldn't have. Sotha tosses the ball toward Aphrodite, and it hits her on the head. She grabs it and starts mouthing off about her not being a monster. She reminds him that it only works on monsters, and it won't have any effect on divine goddesses like, wait, is the ball glowing? The ball begins floating in Aphrodite's hand, and she is slowly sucked inside by its irresistible pull. The ball floats into Sotha's hands, and he sees the diminutive form of Aphrodite stuck inside the capsule ball. Aphrodite begs Sotha to let her out, but he says that he still has things for her to do. The situation is weird, but it all worked out in the end. Sotha has caught his very first monster, a goddess. Sotha was suddenly summoned to heaven, and though it's good and all that he captured the goddess that brought him there, he still doesn't really know what to do. He could try and become a Pokemon master, but some kid from Palatown already beat him to it. A beam of light suddenly shines from above, which brings him to a brand new world teeming with life. A little too much life, as even the flowers seem to have eyes. Sotha gets the gist of the situation, so he does what any sane person would do in this situation. Walk to the nearest town. While following the road, he stumbles upon a monster, a goblin. Sotha cautiously plans his next move. Goblins usually appear in the early stages of video games, stories, and Isekai novels. He notices that his job, Monster Tamer, isn't a direct fighting class, so he brings out Aphrodite, who appears depressed and has given up on life. Sotha stumbles around in the dark figuring out how to open the ball, but then he realizes that all he has to do is think about it. He thinks summon, which releases Aphrodite from her spherical prison. Aphrodite is elated to finally be out of there, but this feeling subsides and switches into rage. Sotha apologizes for enslaving her inside a Pokeball. He meant no offense, really. He tells her to be a bit quieter since there are monsters nearby. Aphrodite surveys their surroundings, but all she sees is a lowly goblin chasing a bunny rabbit. Sotha sees how confident Aphrodite is and remarks that she must be really strong. Naturally, since Aphrodite is a goddess, he asks her to drive away the goblin nearby, and Aphrodite agrees. They can talk about their little arrangement after. She walks behind the goblin, raises her hand in the air, and invokes her power and authority as a goddess. The air itself seems to be gathering around Aphrodite, and Sotha can sense that something amazing is about to happen. Aphrodite casts her magic, God's breath, on the goblin. Sotha prepares to cheer harder than he's ever cheered before, but nothing happens. Silence. That can't be right. Aphrodite repeatedly attempts to cast God's blessing again, but still nothing. It looks like there's a new member of the Useless Goddess Club. The angry goblin starts tugging on Aphrodite's skirt, and she starts begging for Sotha's help. Aphrodite doesn't seem to be very capable at all. However, Sotha is still a monster tamer, and he finds it weird that a goddess can't even be a little goblin. He has nothing to lose by trying, so he gets a running start and kicks the goblin in the face. The goblin faints. Sotha gains 5 experience points. Sotha captures the goblin with another capsule ball, while Aphrodite starts crying about her current situation. Sotha tries to cheer her up, but she doesn't like him shortening her name to Afro, since her hair is silky smooth. Instead, she has him call her Day, if he really insists on shortening it. Sotha asks Day why she wasn't able to beat the goblin when all it took was one good kick in the face. Also, didn't that goblin look like a child? They just beat up a kid. Aphrodite had forgotten it at first, but she explains that a divine being's divine power is rather limited outside of heaven. That must be why her anti-world magic that turns all of creation into ashes, God's breath, didn't work. She tells Sotha that he can confirm these details for himself by using his ability as a monster tamer to look at her status. Sotha brings up the window, and just as Aphrodite explained, all her stats except for vitality have dropped to the single digit. Aphrodite has a working theory of how she ended up being captured in a capsule ball, and she thinks that this is due to the divine protection that Sotha has. Unlike other passive skills, which are often obtained and learned through hard work, divine protections act like innate talents that one is born with. Originally, divine protection only manifested in great historical figures, so Sotha takes a look at his. He possesses the absolute domination skill, which allows him to dominate everything and everyone. The divine protection that Sotha possesses practically subverts everything bad about the Monster Tamer class. Ordinarily, the most powerful monster he could possibly tame is probably a wolf, but because of this unique passive, he is able to tame just about anything, even humans. Sotha can only describe his abilities as a bug. It isn't something that should exist in this world. Day notices something odd about his stats. They're all absurdly and incredibly high. Sotha wonders if the goblin he defeated was some sort of hidden boss that gives a boatload of experience points, but even Day can tell that that isn't it. She has a sudden realization, and she credits herself for Sotha's sudden power-up. Because Sotha captured her, her stats were shared with him as well. This proves to be good news, as Day remarks that they might be able to return to Sotha's original world sooner than expected. When he asks what she means by this, she explains that he was a hero summoned to save the world of Atalhide. Once he defeats the demon lord Prophecy to resurrect shortly after his arrival, he can return home to his original world. Even though she claimed to have told him this earlier, Sotha has no idea what she's talking about. In any case, the demon lord will resurrect soon. In preparation for this, Day and the other divine beings have been summoning heroes from Earth to Atalhide in an effort to face him. Sotha worries about the others who were sent alongside him, but then he gets to thinking. He asks if, once he defeats the demon lord and returns to Earth, will his abilities be removed? Aphrodite says no, and that his abilities would transfer over. Not even the gods can remove an ability given to him. This means that Sotha can bring back things in his capsule balls back to Earth with him, though she warns him that divine beings will keep an eye on him so that he doesn't abuse his powers. With all this information in mind, Sotha decides on a single goal while he is living in this world. Day is happy that he's decided to defeat the demon lord without having to be convinced, but that isn't the full truth. Though Sotha does eventually plan to defeat the demon lord and return to his own world, he has another goal to fulfill. He plans to use his absolute domination ability to capture as many humans and monster girls as possible to bring back to Earth. Day's expression says one thing: what? Isekai harems, full of buxom and aggressively affectionate women, are the hallmark of the genre. You'd be hard-pressed to find a man who wouldn't want one, but Sotha doesn't intend to live in a world without internet, air conditioning, and indoor plumbing, so he plans to defeat the demon lord, but only after creating his ideal harem. Day tells him that something like that isn't ethically acceptable, nor can she overlook something completely immoral. Unfortunately for her, Sotha has no plans to beat the demon lord until he fulfills his dream. If he doesn't, then Day won't be able to go back to heaven either. Realizing that Sotha is right, Day begrudgingly decides to help Sotha enslave women in his capsule balls. This marks the beginning of an unlikely and extremely tenuous partnership. It's beautiful. Though Sotha is delighted to see that his statistics are through the roof, he notices that everything other than resistance appears to be relatively low. Day explains that monster tamers naturally have low base stats to begin with. Sotha notices that another skill, Appraisal Eye, was added to his status. However, Day suddenly warns him that there are even more goblins nearby. Again, those look like kids. Can you just leave them alone? Sotha uses his new appraisal ability to get a better look at what he's dealing with. It is a level 1 goblin with a level cap of 5. Its stats are laughably low compared to Sotha's. Day urges him to get rid of it already, but only after confirming that the experience points he gains from defeating it and capturing it with a capsule ball are the same. An hour later, Sotha has captured 18 goblins. However, even with this large collection, his level hasn't been raised at all. Regardless, he is fascinated by the power of the capsule ball, and he wonders how it is able to fit so many things into such a small space. He asks Day if there is a limit to the number of creatures he can contract with, and she explains that the limit is initially 1. However, the limit increases by 1 more for every 10 levels he has. Sotha does some quick mathematics in his head, and he realizes that his current limit is 56. That's an insane amount in his eyes. That's practically a small army. Thinking back to earlier, Sotha found no trouble in defeating the goblins, which means that this area's average level is far below his. He asks Day if the goblins will listen to him, since he caught them by force. Day tells him that there's no need to worry. Any monster she catches will be unquestionably loyal to him, and he can give them whatever command he wants. It slowly dawns on Sotha that this applies to Day as well, and it seems like she isn't aware of it either. Sotha's adolescent mind can't help but think of all the things he can ask Day to do, thinking that now is as good a time as any to test out his ability. Sotha asks Day to spin in place. Day looks at him funny, as if the supreme goddess of love and beauty would do something as frivolous as spinning in place. Day ends up spinning frivolously in place, even though she doesn't want to. Her skirt ends up flipping in the wind, which is exactly what Sotha was aiming for. Day yells at Sotha and calls him an idiot. He apologizes for messing with her, and he says that it was just a test to see how ridiculous his orders can be. Day decides to forgive him just this once, but then she realizes that Sotha could have had rather unsavory intentions by issuing less than wholesome commands to her. Day says that even if she agreed on gathering girls for his harem, she didn't agree on becoming part of it herself. Sotha asks if this is a progress flag, and Day punches him into space. Day may be a beautiful woman, but to Sotha, she seems more like a naggy childhood friend than anything else. In the meantime, Sotha acknowledges that he went too far, and he is now reflecting on his actions. After wandering for a few hours, Day gets tired. She asks Sotha to place her back into his capsule ball in the meantime. Sotha thought that Day really hated being inside his ball, and though this is true, Day ultimately feels that it is far more comfortable being inside. She doesn't hunger nor tire, and there's nothing to stress about. She explains that his capsule ball serves as a first aid station of sorts, since it can cure all abnormal statuses, and it also possesses a potent healing effect. Furthermore, this restorative effect also temporarily fixes the curse that Day has as a result of not being in heaven. But above all these very valid reasons, Day just wants to be inside the ball so that she doesn't have to walk. She returns to the ball, and Sotha is cursed with the human pain of having to walk. After a few hours, Sotha calls out to Day inside the capsule ball. She is roused awake, only to notice that there seem to be even more goblins than usual. She pops out of the ball and asks Sotha why their population seems to have increased. He explains that he ran into a few more goblins on the way, so now their total number is 37. But that isn't the important bit. The important part is that they have now arrived in a town. Sotha glances at a sign and learns that they are in St. Bell City, a bustling trade hub. He is surprised that he can read the signs without issues, and Day says that all humans summoned from Earth are blessed with sufficient linguistic knowledge. Sotha notices that there are several goblins and orcs working around town, and he guesses that the city must treat them as laborers. He also notices a massive rock turtle, but when he asks Day for more details about it, she has no idea. She tells him not to expect her to know everything about the world just because she is a goddess, and she proudly admits that this is her first time coming to the surface of Adelheid too. That isn't really something she should be proudly saying, I feel. Sotha has been thinking about it for a while now, but Day seems really useless to him. He pulls up her status window and notices that there seems to be an unknown label right under her skills list. Day explains that this is part of her passive skill concealment, which prevents other people from seeing what these skills are. Certain skills also have this as a passive sub-skill. For once, Sotha is impressed that Day actually has quite an impressive skill set. Even though she is weakened, Day is, for all intents and purposes, still a goddess. Yeah, about that. While twiddling her fingers together, Day explains that, due to the curse placed on her, most of her skills have been sealed away. Any skills that are available to her are unfortunately in an extremely weakened state. Deep down, Sotha expected as much. However, despite having absolutely nothing to contribute, she begs Sotha not to abandon her. Sotha doesn't immediately react, so Day threatens him with fake curses, such as that if he does, then he'll die in a horrible manner. Sotha understands as much, so he asks her to let him go. Not only will Sotha have to survive on his own, but he'll also have to provide for Day. At least the other useless goddess could do cool party tricks. First, Sotha has to find work. Fortunately for him, most Isekai worlds have great economies, and work is readily available. Thus, he's off to the Adventurers Guild. Day clings onto Sotha's arm as they enter the guild, filled with adventurers and a job posting board brimming with requests. Day says that they look out of place, which isn't surprising. Sotha is still in his school uniform, while Day is in her divine garments. One of the patrons notices the scantily clad Day, which in turn causes the rest of the establishment to take notice. The air begins to be filled with hoots and whistles. For better or for worse, Day's beauty has eclipsed the strangeness of their outfits. They arrive at the front desk, where the receptionist, Chloe, is eager to assist them. Seeing a real-life cat girl before his very eyes, Sotha can't help but want to capture her already. Day can sense that he was thinking of something depraved. Chloe asks him what his business is today, and Sotha explains that they are looking for work and that it is their first time in the city. Chloe first has him fill out a guild card for registration purposes, and he fluidly writes the language, even though he's never studied it himself. It all feels very weird to him. Sotha is officially registered as a rank G adventurer, and he is given a card to serve as his badge. Chloe explains the use of the establishment. Adventurers Guilds are places that issue quests that have been put up by other countries or individuals. Quests can range from finding lost kittens or killing God, and as an adventurer accumulates enough achievements, they can increase their rank, and the number of quests they can take increases. Sotha asks how this rank-up system works, and Chloe informs him that the guild system uses an arbitrary judge system. This means that even if Sotha does unbelievable things like defeating the Demon King by punching him in the face, he might not rank up if the guild council doesn't like him. Chloe directs them to the guild board, where they can pick out a request and bring it to her to see if they'd like to accept it. Sotha looks around for something easy to do, and he sees that he is only eligible to do 3 quests: wolf subjugation, goblin subjugation, and medicinal grass collection. Chloe says that he'll need to carve out monster parts to prove that he defeated the required monsters during subjugation quests. But since Sotha wants to focus on gathering monster allies, he decides to perform a simple search quest for now. Chloe stamps their grass collection quest, and to help them out on their first quest, she hands them a helpful pamphlet and a beginner support set as a small gift. Sotha is happy to get all the help he can get. They head into Kaser Forest, but Day asks him why they seem to be going deeper than necessary. He explains that it'd be bad if other adventurers saw him using his goblins, since they'd definitely attack them on the spot. Day concedes to his point, but she is tired, so she asks to be kept inside the capsule ball for now. After reaching a sufficiently deep part of the forest, Sotha releases all 37 of his goblins. Even though they're all low-leveled, they're cut as hell. You could probably shred cheese on their abs. He calls his goblins' attention, and he tells them to collect medicinal grass. Anything they find is to be brought back to a specific spot under a tree, and if they happen to encounter any humans, they are to run away without fighting. The goblins have their orders, and they spread out. They seem to have understood his commands, but Sotha can't help but be worried for them. Regardless, he hopes that his goblins do a good job. However, unbeknownst to him, something dangerous lurks in the woods, threatening to shut down Sotha's whole operation. After a few hours, the goblins return with stacks of medicinal herbs, which is far more than what Sotha could have gathered alone. Even though he tried searching for some himself, he came back empty-handed. Instead, he managed to gather another 15 goblin friends, so it wasn't a total loss. He recalls the goblins that have returned, and he prepares to head back into town. But he notices that some goblins have yet to return. He hears something rustling in the bushes, but what comes out isn't goblins. 2 level 3 wolves emerge, their jaws still dripping with blood. Sotha fears that his goblins have been eaten. He won't stand for it. They will be punished. A few more wolves jump out from behind the trees. 5 in total circle him closely. They think they have the numerical advantage, but they couldn't be more wrong. Sotha throws out his capsule ball and releases his army of goblins. Though the wolves are superior in terms of physical strength, the goblins hold the advantage in numbers, cunning, and tactics. However, in the end, the battle is pretty much at a stalemate. Thus, Sotha decides to even the odds, and he uses his capsule ball to capture the wolves while they are distracted. It is an overwhelming victory. However, Sotha has learned much from this incident, and he recognizes the need to prepare countermeasures to prevent a similar incident from happening in the future. Sotha releases a reluctant Day to help him carry the sacks of herbs back to town. The goblins would attract too much attention if Sotha didn't enlist her help. Even though he captured quite a lot of monsters, Sotha notices that his level hasn't gone up at all. However, he has gained a new skill, Monster Meld. It is a skill that allows him to combine 2 monsters together, but to use it, he needs a total of 50 tamed monsters. This piques Sotha's curiosity, and he plans to experiment with it tonight. Sotha and Day return to the guild and turn in their materials for a hopping 40,000 gold reward. Chloe is particularly impressed with Sotha, since most novice adventurers ordinarily struggle to obtain a single herd. Sotha scratches his head and downplays his amazingness. It was mostly his goblins that did the heavy lifting after all. The pair head outside, where Sotha learns that 1 gold coin is worth slightly more than a single yen. That means that Sotha has effectively earned roughly 40,000 yen in a single day of work. With this much money, they can afford to stay at a half-decent inn. Unfortunately, the room is not up to Day's standards. The tiny room costs 4,000 gold a night to stay in, which includes 2 meals. Day asks what the heck happened to staying at the Hilton Hotel, but Sotha says that a roof over their heads is enough. He'd also prefer to be more frugal with their funds, since they also need to allocate funds for his monsters to eat. Dai's dream of sleeping in one of those fancy beds and relaxing in a bathtub is shattered. She begrudgingly returns to the capsule ball to sleep. Now that Sotha has a private room and has finished feeding his monsters, there's only one thing left to do. He brings out his status window, and he prepares to test out his monster meld skill. Sotha is shown the small system window that allows him to select which monsters to meld together. Even Day is a choice. He wonders what would happen if he merged Day and a goblin together, but he sweeps that unholy abomination into the back of his mind. He first tries selecting a goblin and a wolf, but that specific combination doesn't work. Sotha is left with just combing 2 goblins together, and it works. The result will be a goblin elite, a better, faster, and stronger version of your run-of-the-mill goblin. However, it doesn't stop there. By combining 2 goblin elites together, he can come up with a goblin knight, an even more powerful version. After 20 minutes of messing around with the monster melding menu, the 42 goblins at his disposal have become 1 elite goblin and 10 goblin knights. Their equipment seems to have improved as well. The goblin elite looks like a new, motivated employee, while the goblin knights have an air of authority about them, just like that of a department head. Unfortunately, this is as far as the monster melder will let him go, so he decides to leave them be for now. Meanwhile, in the dead of night, a girl in a maid outfit flees from a large group of pursuers. The girl how things came to this. She mutters that none of this would have happened if a certain someone didn't suddenly disappear. The people chasing her quickly realize how bad it would be if she were to escape. Their master, Bakaraja, would have their hands. Since the drug they used on her doesn't seem to be working, they have little choice but to take her by force, even if it means hurting her. The leader instructs his men to ready their bows. They take aim at the defenseless girl, and they loose their arrows. An arrow finds its mark on her back, causing the girl to tumble over a cliff. She reaches out in vain for the demon lord to save her, but nobody comes to her aid. The next morning, Sotha and Day head into the city, but their destination today isn't the forest. Sotha has something else planned. They drop by a guild-affiliated general store, which gives special discounts to members of the guild. Not only that, but all goods are also tax-exempt. This is a good opportunity to stock up on the supplies they need. They step inside, and the shopkeeper, Edgar, welcomes them with open arms. Sotha asks if he has any affordable clothing on hand, and Edgar takes one look at Day. She needs clothes more than anything else, so he guides them to the back. Day asks him if they went all this way just to buy clothes for her, which Sotha affirms. Day's clothes stand out far too much, and it'd be better if she wore something more appropriate for the area. Day is excited. This is the first time she's ever bought clothes for herself. She confides that, back in heaven, they were largely restricted to only wearing certain kinds of clothes. Sotha doesn't find that surprising, since a goddess wearing a tracksuit wouldn't be very respected except by Russians. But for Day to be this excited, Sotha muses that she must be an ordinary girl, deep down. Edgar recommends them a set of adventurers' outfits, which are not only functional, but are cheap to boot. Sotha falls in love with them at first sight, but Day has other, more violent thoughts. She thinks that the outfits are far too plain, and that she'd much prefer the bewitching dancer's outfit, rank E. Unfortunately, not only are the clothes flashy, but they are also a whopping 18,000 gold. Sotha reminds her that they're here to pick out clothes that don't stand out, but Day doesn't care. As the goddess of love and beauty, she wouldn't be caught dead in those rags they call an outfit. Though Sotha didn't want to resort to underhanded tactics, he decides to flatter Day in the hopes that it would be enough to convince her. Surprisingly enough, it works. Day isn't used to being called pretty, and she suddenly acts all shy and bashful about it. Sotha asks her why she's acting so weird about it, and she explains that divine beings don't usually mingle with people, so being praised like this is rare. Just this once, she decides to give in. Day puts on her new outfit, which she acknowledges isn't as plain as she thought. Sotha doesn't look too shabby himself, and the pair really look like real Adelheid residents now. They head to the nearby Kaiser forest, where he instructs his goblins to gather herbs, just like yesterday. The goblins set out and do as they are told. Even though their numbers have dwindled, Sotha is confident that they won't fall prey to wolves. He takes Dae with him so they can capture more goblins to add to their ranks, but after no time at all, Dae complains about being tired, and she sits down on the grass. The useless goddess has returned. Sotha tells her to get back inside his ball, but Dae notices something dripping from a nearby tree. She looks up, and she alerts Sotha to what she sees. A girl, badly injured, is nestled among the trees. It's amazing how they didn't notice her until now.